Hello and welcome to another episode of PPC Town Hall. My name is Fred Valles. I'm your host. I'm also the co-founder of Optmyzr. And last week we had a great session. There was a lot of talk about automation and how Google is changing things. Really well attended session. And we thought we'd continue in that vein and talk to two people who've just come up with a new report that's talking about digital marketing in a VUCA world. And VUCA stands for volatile, unstable, complex, and ambiguous. And I think we can all certainly agree that 2020 has been exactly that kind of VUCA year. So what does that mean? Right, so we're going to talk about some of the unstableness and the constant change that's happening, but we're also going to talk about automation. And this is a trend that we've long been seeing, where the engines are just moving more and more towards automating the tasks that we've done. The authors of the report talk to a lot of agencies, a lot of experts, so what they have to share, I think, is going to be really amazing. And as a special thank you for watching the session with us live today, we're going to have a couple of, we will give you that report for free for the first 20 people who go to the website with the code that we'll be sharing with you. So stay tuned, we'll have that code towards the end, but let's go talk about digital marketing in a VUCA world. Lukas, Anders, welcome. Thanks for joining us on the show today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Fred.
Where are you guys calling us from today? I'm in California.
So I'll start. I'm in London, which has been quite a sunny day so far, but it's literally just changed to quite a storm. So I'm hoping there's not going to be any background noises, but it's been quite interesting in the last 10 minutes.
Okay, well, welcome from London. Good to hear that you finally don't have rain for a change. In Anders, we had you on a couple of weeks ago, right? Are you still in Paris?
Still in Paris, and yeah, we're expecting announcements from the president in a couple of hours about, how VUCA the coming weeks are going to be. It's probably locked down again, so yeah, tough times these days. Yeah, so I'm calling in from Paris. I'm Danish, but I've been in France for more years than I lived in Denmark. So quite the European.
Vous parlez français mieux que le danois. Well, good. Yeah, I speak a little bit of French because I'm Belgian. It's one of the languages we're required to learn, originally Flemish, though. But good, yeah. So VUCA world. So tell us a little bit about the report before we jump in. Why did you decide to write this report?
The sort of the report idea started out 2.5-3 years ago. I sold my last agency back then. It was bought up by Accenture. What was left of it was bought up by Accenture after having been acquired by another company. And it was my time to move out of the agency business and do something else. And what I really wanted to do was to find and share digital marketing insights. As an agency leader and an agency founder, I was always looking out. I was going to conferences. I was listening to you, Fred, and I was looking for insight. I was looking for digital marketing insights. What's going to happen next year? What works this year? What about all these things that the engines are coming out with? All the media owners are suggesting, all the technology owners are suggesting. How do you sort through that and find what is good and what is bad? So that was the original idea. I was always also judging search awards, other digital marketing awards, and I saw so much good stuff that I wanted to share. And basically, if you've ever been to an award ceremony, it's like, well, and the winner is, and you get a name, and I felt that frustrating. I wanted to share stuff.
Yeah, exactly. How did they win, right?
Sorry?
How did they win? What's the secret of how do I get there?
Absolutely. Recently I see, voices saying, oh, you just have to pay and then you'll win an award. And as a judge, I totally don't agree with that. So I'm taking bites there. But anyway, I wanted to start.
I think it's a little bit, it is a weird space, right? Because the award ceremonies, they make money by selling tickets to the award show. So I think most people, and actually correct me on this, like, does everyone who nominate themselves, if they have a pulse, do you get shortlisted? Or is there even like sort of a cutoff at that first level?
So there is a cutoff, but it depends how many entries there are. So you know, so many categories. So it is not really difficult to be nominated somewhere. So what I really focus on,
nominations are self-nominated, right?
So there's a like if you look at categories like best PPC campaign, for example, there will be, I don't know how many entries, but typically maybe 25, 30, 50 entries, and there's only like a short list of maximum 10. So they will be the best of those 50, and then the winner will really be the best within those 10. But in other categories, there can be less entries, so there will be less competition to be shortlisted. So we weren't looking at shortlisted, we were looking at award win. So what we do in the research is,
So I'm happy to hear it.
Nice.
We won one right there, right?
Yeah, I don't even remember if I judged that one. I'm not sure. I probably read the entry. Do we catch up questions like this straight away?
Do we what?
On the screen. Why this name VUCA?
Oh yeah, okay. Let me put the. Okay, so great question from the audience. So why VUCA, right? So let's talk about VUCA. So Anders will explain that a bit.
I got lost there, but so the story of it is look into insights, find experts, survey award-winning teams. So that the best way to find teams is to say, okay, who won and what, and then ask them what's going on, what are the trends. So why VUCA? When we started out looking at this report, actually we started out looking at PPC trends in the market, right, Lukas?
Yeah.
that was the original idea, and this ended up being not just PPC but digital marketing overall. And in the VUCA world, because the major trend that we were seeing was that everything was chaotic, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. When I first saw these four words there, I was like, well, this really describes the world that we're living in. And we were interested in, what does it do to the data? What does it do to this already, constantly changing sector of digital marketing? Right. So that's for going in that direction.
And so when you put together that report, you talked to a number of people, right? So and Lukas, actually tell us a little bit about the role that you played. We haven't heard much from you yet.
Absolutely. So Anders actually contacted me about the report, and he contacted me initially about the first sort of version of this report, of a similar report from 2018. And the one reason where it really resonated with me was the specifics of knowledge sharing, because I work as a freelancer. I work with a lot of agencies here in the UK. I also have my own agency that I provide expertise for clients. And one of the main things that you always look for are the likes of benchmarks, trends, anything that you can basically take away and more easily explain some of the craziness happening online every now and again. And so when Anders contacted me and said that he would like to cooperate on this and collaborate on it and actually be able to share this information with a lot of people, I was on board pretty much right away from that one call that we had. And since then it grew, and we focused on our own kind of key strengths when it comes to, for example, me looking at handling the data of the responses and kind of helping out with that more, because that's kind of where some of my technical background is as well, and basically syncing this together with frequent calls with Anders that we had, making sure that we synced our ideas together as well and our views on the data that is there, because as you can imagine yourself, you can extrapolate data in almost any way you would like it to look. But when we had the raw data, we really wanted to make sure that what we were looking at, we were describing it as impartially as possible. So that's where a lot of back and forth was happening, even up until the last few days, actually. So it's been a very cool ride writing this report.
Nice. So let's talk about the report a bit. So I think one of the first points about VUCA and the world being so volatile, what happened in 2020 and what's still happening in 2020, obviously, but big impact on digital agencies, right? So what are some of the numbers that you saw?
Yeah, so I think the first big one, so you see it on the left side there, we we asked the 20 agencies that participated in the survey, we asked them, how bad were you hit? So you got about, was it 15%? That was no change, plus minus 10%. You got the huge chunk, 50%, saying between 10 to 40% reduction in media spend, and you got a fairly large chunk there saying more than that, so 40 to 60% reduction in media spend. We also had other options there. We removed them because there was nobody responding. So we're looking at agencies suddenly having 40% of their media spend disappear. And as we know, a lot of the economic models are tied in some way into the spend, not 100%, but very few are on a retainer basis or on consultancy basis. So this means they lose a lot of money. They lose a lot of activity. And then the other thing is that the rest of the activity is, had to be changed. You had to do something. Like, everybody's in panic. Yeah, what do you do?
And Lukas, what did you see from working with so many agencies? Did they actually just stop working with those clients because it didn't make financial sense, or did they put into place plans to sort of transition to almost bridge with the expectation that things would be okay in a couple of months?
So in certain cases, that's actually been the case, that some of the agency-client relationship has sort of ended because of that. Now, bearing in mind that the vast majority of agencies, particularly the big ones in the UK, they do have very different clients in their portfolio. So that's where the impact was basically mostly in the sort of 40 to 60% range. But yes, I definitely know of instances where clients basically have stopped their relationships with the agencies because they were the most hit, particularly around tourism, hotels, and some retail as well. Although, as we will see later on as well, retail was one of the areas, particularly for consumers, that also thrived in this time.
Yeah. Anders, what did you see?
Sorry?
So what did you see anything different? Let's talk about maybe the third wave, right? So I think some companies that we saw were trying to bridge the gap to when things would get better, but now we're in that third wave. And like you're saying, you're going to find out any minute whether France has additional lockdowns,
yeah,
which might be, and I hear restaurants and bars largely are having to close more again. So are we seeing anything different, or is this just kind of the same thing again?
But the big movements is that, so the agencies, what they saw straight away was, a number of advertisers would just cut spend. What happens in marketing as soon as there's uncertainty is that you reduce risk. As soon as you're into performance, you'll say, okay, I don't know how this is going to perform. I'm going to reduce risk. I'm going to do less. So everybody was doing less, and then the ones that were maintaining. So there's very few. There are examples of growth, but they're very niche related. So what you see is that a lot of people resaddling. Resaddling means you got to rethink everything. So in the case of one of the things that we saw, that we asked a question about smart bidding overall. What did you do when suddenly user behavior totally changed? Did you just continue as it was before? And you had so I actually thought it was fairly low. A fifth of people, or a fifth of projects, sort of on an average, would have a totally changed bidding strategy on that basis. I would have expected more like 75, actually. But this all depends on the nature of the business that you're running and whether you're impacted or not. It's so varied the way the lockdown would impact people. Of course, anything related with travel would just shut down. Anything related with retail would be depending on the type of product you're selling.
And I think one of the big parts of the report is about the shift towards automation, and automation obviously is very helpful in these uncertain times. But one of the points that you made, and let's talk about this, but if you put the wrong data in, the wrong prediction will come out. And I think part of the concern and what you guys were trying to investigate was, has there been so much volatility in the current situation that the machine learning model is actually breaking and is not able to deal with this, what's happening right now? And by the way, I don't want to say the word too much because YouTube doesn't like it when we do, and then the video gets so let's not say the word, but we all know that, right? But yeah, what did you guys see in terms of the volatility caused by 2020, and how did the machine learning models respond to that?
So just to reframe this a little bit, when we talk about VUCA, so of course there's COVID and there's lockdown, but there's also a couple of other things like terrorism, like the end of cookies, and there are and more AI, and also less data sometimes. So it's actually a number of things that we're seeing. We're putting all these together under the VUCA, into the VUCA framework. The direct impact is, of course, more easily measurable on the COVID, because it's such an abrupt change, and it was less visible than we actually expected. We see people adopt automated or machine learning based bidding massively, huge increase in adoption. We saw them, so we got feedback from agencies saying we use data analysts in comparably less cases than we did before, which is sort of
that's interesting, right? Because so what's going on? Are they figuring the machine is just taking care of everything and you no longer need a data analyst, or you think that's a miscalculation?
This is one of the places where we spend a lot of hours actually discussing.
Yes. It actually felt like kind of the outcome is almost two sides to a coin, where on one hand there is less of an involvement of data analysts because there is more reliance on AI. But on the other side as well, it's not about the position of the data analyst. It's more that insight into performance is actually being put on the marketer's shoulders. So where previously you would have a dedicated analyst that would be able to support you with some of these analyses and basically looking at different trends, looking at performance with different impacts. You now have this almost becoming a standard part of a marketer's job, instead of focusing on the main platform changes and trends and creatives.
And so what I'm showing here on the screen is I guess the answer to the question: do you have a dedicated analyst function attached to your projects?
Mm.
We also see the distribution on the left, right?
Yes. So in 2018, that pie chart was basically the other way around, where over 60% of respondents said that yes, they had a dedicated data analyst on their team attached to their projects. Obviously, this could also mean that the nature of the projects has changed a little bit. Maybe some of the agencies don't really have such high-profile projects as much anymore. Could be that some of that got watered down a little bit, if you will. But it still suggests that there is quite a notable shift to how specifically data within paid search is being managed.
Mm-hmm.
And there was an interesting quote from Aaron Levy from Tenuity, saying everybody wants data science, but nobody wants to pay for it. Which sort of ties back to that question of maybe advertiser agency relationship, which is not always easy. So when do you pay for what? There you have the quote. So they look at the data they can see, but with tunnel vision. And I think we've got another approach on this one, saying, well, there are what we call black boxes, with the input, as you mentioned earlier, the input from one side and then the prediction that comes out on the other side, and we don't really know what happens in between. But should we not be curious about it? And we should as data analysts. It's a question we couldn't immediately say, okay, we're gonna look at the data and say in 2018 there were more data analysts, or more people saying we have a dedicated analyst, and in 2020 less people saying we have a dedicated analyst. We weren't happy saying, well, that means there's less data analysis, because we think it's the opposite. So it's probably a changing roles within agencies, or changing roles between advertisers, agencies, and maybe consultancies. At least we know that there's a lot of things happening in this space.
Yeah, and I want to bring up this slide here, right? So this is later in the report, but basically I think you're making the point that digital marketing is becoming much more of a black box, at least within the engines, right? As the Google, for example, automates bidding, automates ads through responsive search ads. We know a little bit less about what's happening. And so maybe the assumption is, well, if we don't see the data, we don't get the metrics, we don't get the optimization levers the way that we did before, maybe there's not so much of a point for having a data analyst to do that work for us. But then I suppose the point you're making here, and the kind of point we make at Optmyzr too, is that yes, the role is shifting and you're not managing within that tiny bubble of Google Ads, but you're managing at the periphery of the black box of the machine learning system. And, things happen in the black box. But if you don't like what's happening in the black box, or you want to make it a tiny bit better, you still have control over the inputs to that black box, right? And that also then goes to your point of bad data in, bad results out.
Absolutely, and so an interesting take on this was so we've been discussing a lot on social media about this, as a warm up for the recent report, and I got one feedback saying, hey, it's we try out the smart bidding or the automated solution, and if it doesn't work, we're going to try another one. And it's like, it used to be we test hypotheses, and now it's we test algorithms, and then if one doesn't work, we'll try another one, and we'll try another one, and we'll try another one. So the testing has moved level, right? It used to be we test an idea, now it's we test a tool, or we test an algorithm, which is an interesting insight. I thought that was really interesting to see that type of approach.
Yeah, and so when I wrote about it, it's like it's the PPC role is becoming that of the PPC doctor, and basically think about prescribing the right medicine to solve your problem. And even if you said, well, you should do automated bidding, well, there's like 9 types of automated bidding just from Google alone, right? So it's not about flipping the switch. It's about, okay, test this one, and how is this one better than that one, and really understanding and picking your automation first of all, and then within the scope of the automation that you've picked, how do you inform it about what success means to your business? What is a conversion? You also asked some questions about lifetime value, right? And so what is the right way to help these automated systems drive better results?
I actually kind of wanted to slightly come back to your point about being a paid search doctor in a way, because the one challenge that you have with the black boxes within AI and trusting the inputs and outputs is that if you do go to a doctor, you have to tell him what your symptoms are so that you can actually analyze what is going on. And this is one of the biggest challenges with using automation as it is at the moment, and as it's becoming a bit more opaque, is that you cannot actually see some of those symptoms. You cannot really analyze them the same way. So your input may not have changed at all, but suddenly your output may be changing because of something you cannot actually fully identify. It starts by removing some search terms. I mean, we have known on social media where people are sharing their accounts, the impact is up to 50% of their search terms in terms of their cost is basically, dark. They cannot identify where that's going. It goes to average positions as well. That's been changed a little while ago now, but people are still kind of double checking and wondering where their ads are actually still appearing right now, because if you don't have much competition on the platform,
they're certainly still paying for them. It's a mystery.
Well, exactly, and when you don't have much competition on some of your results, position 1 could be above the results, it could be below the results, and there's very different traffic volume for those 2 instances. So you can find yourself in a position where suddenly you don't really know why suddenly all your traffic has disappeared, or why suddenly you have to pay more without really knowing, or haven't really changed anything on the input side of things.
Mm-hmm. So Julien, you seem French by that last name, but it's asking a good question right there. So is the problem not the fact that we have automation, but who's pushing the automation, and that the incentives might be misaligned? I have an opinion on that, so I'll definitely answer that.
Yeah, I think there might be 3 opinions on this one.
You guys start.
Lukas? I think we agree. No, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we will definitely have a very similar opinion, Anders and I. As we found from working on the report, we are very much on the same page. I think for me, it's basically just trying to understand some of the logic behind what's going on. I don't think that any particular platform has any reason necessarily to basically just do something that wouldn't necessarily be amazing for marketers, but there's also some thoughts behind that that's not the case. I think for me, basically the whole idea of paid search in history and up until now has been that everything is so transparent. You can track everything down to a single penny you spend, and you will be able to show your results. This is now basically changing the fundamentals of what paid search would be for me, because I cannot explain everything.
Yeah, so very similar. We're moving away from raw data. I mean, it's always been like this with the platform. So if we look at not just the search engines, but look at Facebook, Amazon, whatever, they are platforms where basically, if you have a website, you own the website, you pay for the hosting, you are the owner of the data that sort of runs through that platform. If you have a Facebook page, you are not the owner of the page, of the data, of anything. You sign a contract with Mark, or you go on Amazon, and basically all the data. So they're very generous in Amazon. They give you a lot of data. Facebook is are very good designers. They give you beautiful graphs back, right? That's the insight you get. But the raw data, you don't get it. And it's like, we've forgotten this because we've just gotten used to it. It's like, well, okay, on Facebook you can't track, and why is that? Well, it's because it's Facebook. And okay, yes, on my website I can, on Facebook I can, on Amazon I can get a lot of data, but not necessarily something that corresponds to what I get in other places. And it's like, so that's one side of this. We don't get access to the raw data anymore. We get the data they want to give us. So that's one thing. The other thing, when going back to search, something quite interesting, I think this was Aaron again. He said, search isn't growing anymore. He said, well, yeah, of course, you look at the number of searches, whatever, the nature is changing. There's more Cortana, there's more other stuff. But the volume of searches that people do is not growing anymore. So that's one thing. On the other side, and you can tell me more about this, Fred, but I don't think the CPCs are increasing anymore. I think we've really reached some kind of ceiling or saturation level, where if the CPCs, the cost per click, goes any higher, nobody's going to go there, because they just can't find any profitability in doing ads on a CPC basis.
Right, and I think that's why, and you guys pointed out in the report, but Quality Score is the original machine learning system, and that's why Google has it, because in an ideal world, every single search that happens leads to the most expensive and profitable click. Mm-hmm. And yes, you're right, you're going to be capped at some level on how high that CPC can go, right? So what Google is ultimately trying to do is like, okay, who's that consumer who's actually willing to convert and who's going to click? And that gets combined with the price. And so Google doesn't really think about CPCs. And that's the weird thing. Like the analysts, the business analysts are always like, where are CPCs going? It's like Google doesn't care where the CPCs are going. They care about CPM. I mean, because that's the one thing they control. They can have like, okay, if we have a better search engine and we can get more searches, then we'll make more money because we have a good CPM. CPC, nobody cares because we only get paid if somebody clicks. And if we have, I mean, we could have $1 million CPCs and nobody clicks on an ad and nobody makes any money, right? Right.
And to reach that goal, I mean, if the Optmyzr, that's the data marketer, is focused on the CPC and the keyword and trying to optimize that, but what the engine wants to do is the CPM. They have this incentive of not giving you all the raw data, and then stuffing in whatever CPM, more volume into your coverage, and right. So there's sort of a shift from, well, it's not volume anymore, it's not CPC anymore, it's sort of the density of what you can get out of that data. And so that's my interpretation as well. The less we can let people look into this, the better we can monetize it.
Right. I think, in my opinion, it's also to do with the fact that you have many advertisers, right? And very few of them are true experts, like the three of us might be, and the people watching this call. So a lot of people are going to make really bad decisions if you give them too much data. And so average position, case in point, I mean, everybody was like so focused on position one, quality score. Everybody's focused on having a super high quality score. And then they forget that, yeah, maybe your quality score for keyword is actually one of your most profitable. And so I think that's what Google is fighting against. And you made the point that Facebook is much more about pretty graphs, but Facebook also came into play when machine learning was at a much further along, and they were able to do some things where they didn't have to ask the advertiser for every single little detail. When we started in AdWords, like there was no conversion tracking. There was no quality score. So many things that we take for granted. There was no search terms report. I mean, we're complaining now about losing some of our search terms. When I started doing advertising, there were zero. We did not know. We bought a keyword, we paid a CPC for that, and that was it. We do nothing. We just kind of looked at the bottom line of the business and did we have more money in the bank at the end of the month or not? And that was the gauge of success, right? And so I think in a way, Google Ads and AdWords put themselves in that position where it's very hard to now start reducing the data, even if they think that that would actually be the better way to get more advertisers to be successful. But granted, super frustrating to experts like ourselves, because that's the data that we've used to optimize. And I think the point you're making is data is the new oil in the world, right? Nothing is more valuable than it used to be oil. Now it's all about data. And so you need to have that raw data rather than the processed data with the results already like fed to you.
Yeah. We actually ended up coming up with our own quote. We used a lot of quotes every time there's something we want to sort of express. We used the quotes from all the experts, but we had to put in our own quote at one point, which is can you monetize? Can you extract more value from your data than if you give it to a platform? It's like it's sort of this question of who controls it, and should you keep it or should you give it away to whatever, Google, Facebook, Amazon. I think that illustrates sort of the importance. It's one of the sort of the orientations that we think are really important to start controlling your own data, to start protecting your own data. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't, make it flow. Flowing data between platforms is extremely important to get better insights. But you need to consider every time you do that, and consider what data am I using, what am I giving away, is there anything that I could keep on my end instead of letting somebody else monetize it for me. I think that's quite an interesting point, and quite an important one that we're recommending at the sort of in the last part of the report.
Yeah. And then there's always the speculation like Jitlin is mentioning here. So Google said reducing the data was due to privacy concerns. But was that really the case, or are they trying to hide something? Listen, I'm ex-Google. Maybe I've drank the Kool-Aid, but I do believe that when they say it's for privacy reasons, there's probably at least some level of truth to that. And when you think about it really hard, you could actually start to figure out cases where you could construct sort of an interesting picture of a user that gets into personal details, like what diseases they might have, what their financial situation might be. It's not easy to do, but it can be done. And I think that's where Google's coming from. What I wish, though, is that Google would actually respond by giving us, maybe like Facebook does, give us more of the process data, right? If you're not going to give us the raw insight, then at least help us figure out the search term commonalities where the privacy concerns have been addressed. But you can still tell us, well, okay, we kind of think that maybe saw an example that logo design and trademarking are close variants of one another. Logo design and trademarking, very different, right? Like that's the type of thing we'd want to know so that we can make it a negative keyword.
But so, Fred, to that, I think this is, I think this is really interesting and a really interesting question. I came to this, I think this was in relation with Amazon. Again, there were figures out on the market saying that 42% of reviews on Amazon are fake. Right. Okay. Wild, crazy. Yeah. So we have these big engines, and they're capable. And you said it in the beginning. They're capable of finding people who have an intent. Yeah. So they're capable of finding people who are ready to buy, ready to whatever. But it seems that they're not as clever at finding out people who have a bad intent. Yeah. So people who leave fake reviews, or people who use the data in the wrong way. It seems that they're reluctant. Of course, it's not profitable, is it? But I do think they have some kind of responsibility with the data to weigh those two sides equally. One is okay for commercial purposes and for protective purposes. But is the right thing then to cut off the data, or is it to analyze the data like they do on the other side? I'd go into the second direction and say, well, guys, you are the cleverest engines in the world. Apply your knowledge to the bad stuff as well as the good stuff. Yeah, apply what you know to how to do to your own processes as well.
Yeah. All right, good. Anders, I know you wanted to share some slides, and let's maybe get some takeaways. Like, what is it, based on the report and what you've seen, that you think agencies and PPC advertisers can do to put themselves in a great position to thrive in the VUCA world?
Yeah, I wanted to give sort of a couple of views of what's inside, what we have in the center there is it's the coronavirus, isn't it? It's sort of without scary stuff here. A couple of extracts from the report. We asked questions that were sometimes for fun, but there was a question in the beginning: what is volatile? What is VUCA? It's not just COVID. It's lockdown, yes, of course. It's also face masks. Yeah, it's like, well, human behavior is changing. It's like you don't book a ticket in the same time frame as you did before when you're going somewhere, because you don't know if you're allowed to. It is also protest movements. It's terrorism. It's economic recession. We're going to see this coming. I think it's showing in various places. All of this makes things more volatile. So all of these things influence what we're doing as digital marketers. So a little bit of VUCA in digital, COVID-19, end of cookies, and AI is sort of in a summary, the three big things that we were looking at, and then how to hold or to build firm ground on below you. So we saw this already. I think you showed it just before, the hit that digital marketing agencies, or the ones that we surveyed, took during the sanitary crisis or the lockdown. And then this big question here: do you think AI will be performing your current job in the future? 90% of them, of the survey, of the respondents said, no, we don't think so.
Yeah, that's really interesting, right? What's going on there? I mean, people don't think automation is going to do the work they do today, or they think.
I think they're quite pragmatic about, well, the machines have been there all the time, and they're coming all the time, and we still haven't lost our jobs. On the contrary, we've actually got better jobs. So I think that's the reason why they respond in this way. But I also think that they're very aware of the fact that the scope, as we talk about this in one of the chapters, the scope of work of the machine is moving into the scope of work of the human, right? So the role is different, like you mentioned in your book. So quite an interesting insight. I wanted to sort of quantify this as well and give it some depth. So this is one for you, Fred. The smart bidding, the end of bid tools. Yeah. I was also.
Well, let me answer that.
Sorry?
I'll answer that.
Yeah, tell me.
So, I mean, I think it's very simple, right? So people have this misconception, and they think automated bidding is set it and forget it. By no means. The only thing that automated bidding does is it takes your goal, which is usually ROAS or CPA, which, by the way, they're not very good goals. Like, your actual goal should be profit, but whatever. Google gives you TROAS and TCPA. Okay, so now you get these two goals, and all Google does in its automation is calculate the predicted conversion or the predicted click rates, and they calculate the CPC from that. It's something that we used to do on spreadsheets, right? What they're not looking at is how do things outside of what's happening inside Google. So how does the outside world, how do my promotions, how do those things change what's happening and what the prediction should be? So To me, it's kind of crazy when I see advertisers come in and they set a target CPA and then they walk away, and 2 months later they come back and they check it out again. No, like your targets should still evolve just as much as they used to in the past. But it's it's it just Google does part of it. You still need to manipulate the inputs. And I think it's very much to the point that you made too, right? You got a black box that's doing some calculation. It doesn't mean you don't have control over inputs. It's just that the inputs have shifted out to a little bit further from where they used to be. And thanks for the comment, Jit. And you kind of made me laugh. My point, but once a Googler, always a Googler. That's also the point, by the way, why Optmyzr has never been a bid management company. We've never positioned ourselves as a bid management company because I fundamentally believe that Google is the only one in the world that can do the auction time bidding, and they're the only ones that have as much data. They're the only ones with the machine learning capabilities that they do. And for any other company to try to fight that is just crazy. You gotta figure out how to take the best of what Google does, but then still control it, right? How do you control your inputs, and how do you measure the outputs to make sure that the machine is not doing something that's not great for your business?
Personally, I find that there's a huge level of sort of complacency when it comes to automated bidding, especially in a lot of agencies, where you will actually find that 90% of your time you can almost set the AI bidding and let it do its job, and it will still kind of do a good performance for you. But it's those times when something goes wrong, or when you have a promotion that suddenly skews the data, whether it's a promotion before you started applying automated bidding or a promotion within. Suddenly, as soon as you have an impulse that basically the tool cannot really account for directly, that's where everything kind of falls apart sometimes. So this is where I even feel like sometimes the way that some of the platforms sell automated bidding, where they sell, where they say things like, oh, the tool is learning for 2 weeks, so you shouldn't really touch it for 2 weeks. I understand there is some sort of analysis time, the time period for this to happen, but you should never really be, especially within paid search, in a position that you cannot really change.
By the way, the reason, and let me jump on that, right? So we're getting very tactical here. The reason that Google says don't touch stuff is at some level not because they're scared that you're going to make smart tweaks based on what's happening in your business, but it's because when you change your targets, you might become eligible for fewer or more auctions. And now the search terms mix, the query mix is changing. And as the query mix changes, those might be new searches that Google has never really seen before. And so they might drag down the performance. And then the fear from Google is that this is hard to explain to a user that you've changed your target, stuff is moving, and like there's some portion that Google has already learned about. They know the queries that are staying the same, they're going to continue to perform at the same level they were before, no matter how much you change your target. But it's all that new stuff, right? And now the user is sitting there looking at their overall reports, and they see, oh my God, my CPA is way up. They freak out and they like pull back on the automated bidding, when in fact it was like one really small portion of the automated bidding that was now learning again. And so that's what's so difficult from Google's perspective, is how do you communicate that, and how do you get the average advertiser to make a reasonable decision based on what's happening?
But it's exactly kind of this level of not knowing that does feed the black box as well, not just from the optimization point of view, but even from actually being able to make the correct decision. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head before when you said that it's not necessarily about not having access to all the data. We have had less data before, we've had more data before, but it's more about understanding why some of these changes are happening as well, that will basically set an advertiser's mind at ease, rather than go into crazy conspiracy theories that basically platforms want to make more money.
Well, and sort of knowing what to plan for the future, right? So if we see, RSA versus ETA is a really good topic here. So responsive search ads, that's kind of the way forward. But Google hasn't really officially announced the deprecation of expanded text ads. However, in the interface now, if you want to make a new ad, RSA is the default. And in fact, it's very difficult to find how to do an ETA. You still can, but Google really disincentivizes it at some level. And so now what we're doing is like, oh my God, is Google going to pull this? Is it going to be this year? Is it going to be next year? Like, Or is nothing else going to change? Is it just always still going to be there, and we just have two options? And it's that volatility and the uncertainty, like you say in your report. That's what makes it tough, because how do I plan for my business when I don't know if Google, and by the way, search terms reports and that change was basically announced on the day that it happened.
Yes.
So everybody's scrambling, right? Nobody likes to scramble, especially when we're already in 2020 and every day feels like a scramble. So give us some heads up, right?
That is entirely true, yeah. And I think this is the one point where marketers, no matter how long you've been doing this job, you just feel extra uncertain about, because we are never in a position where we can easily where we can easily understand why a change has happened. We're not privy to some of the thinking that the platforms are doing behind these changes. And you always find yourself in the middle between a client and a platform. One of them changes something, and then you still need to make sense of it. This kind of feeds our view that we've got in the report as well, that basically, especially when it comes to AI, you need to continually test and retest and reset your tests, and basically never really stop. Where previously you wouldn't necessarily have to do it as often as you might do now. But yeah, it's just one of those things where I think extra information would really be helpful for a lot of advertisers.
Yeah. Hey, let me switch topics here for a minute, and we'll go back to Anders and the report. But some of the viewers are saying make this actionable. So here's a script that you can download. It's a geo anomaly detector, right? So we're talking about uncertainty, fluctuation. One thing that's been very challenging for people is that in 2020, the world has completely unflattened. And the point that I make is that when I used to go to conferences, when I could still get on a plane, every city in the world that I go to, they have a Starbucks, guaranteed. So if you were Starbucks, it was really easy. You could just market to all these places and basically know that there's going to be a Starbucks no matter where people are searching from. But now there might be a Starbucks, but it could be closed, or it could be very limited in store capacity, or it might be to-go orders only, right? So how do you stay on top of that? Because I live in California. I have no clue what's happening in New York. I have even less of a clue what's happening in Paris and London, where you guys live, right? So, but the numbers will actually tell me that story. And so here's a script that you can download, and it'll basically pick up and say, oh, there seems to be anomalous behavior in a certain specific location. And that could be a country, could be a state, could be a city. And now you know to go and investigate that, right? So, so that's a script that can really take some of that uncertainty and that volatility that we've talked about, and at least give you more insight into where that volatility is happening, so you can respond to it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's a little sidetrack.
No, it's great, because it's the kind of thing when we discussed COVID as well as an opportunity with Lukas. We felt that this is a great occasion for people to take a step back and look at the bigger picture, unplug the data, rethink a bit, and then plug it back in afterwards. Yeah, because most of the time when you're optimizing. So this whole business of you're optimizing, you're starting somewhere, but maybe you started in the wrong place. And when do you have the opportunity actually to step back and look at the bigger picture again, and then try out, which is something that people need to do, and so also something that we're actually recommending in the report, to sort of make optimization cycles that have an end. Yeah, so don't carry on with the same thing you already did. Unplug sometimes and bigger picture. So a script like that to alert you to, okay, here's something. Maybe you need to just step back and have a broader view of the data. Is interesting.
Yeah. Well, and since we're talking about scripts, I'll put one more up on the screen. This is actually from Niels Roymans. But we were talking about search terms, right? So this is an anomaly detector for search terms, basically rising and declining search terms, all nicely put onto a spreadsheet. Hint, hint, you can also do this in Optmyzr without a script, but here's a script if you want to do it for free. But yeah, so that's another one that helps people deal with volatility. All right, so we're only about 10 minutes left. So Anders, show us maybe some more of the slides that you think.
Yeah, maybe I'll run.
And then we'll give people the link for getting that report.
We asked people about, so one of these big things that is happening is this ITP in Safari that came years ago already. So all the Safari browsers would start removing cookies. So they started with the third-party cookies, and then they actually went into the first-party cookies as well at one point. So ITP has been updated. We called, I think in the report we got a little funny and called the last update the Dory update. You remember Dory from Finding Nemo? This fish, forgets everything every 30 seconds. Like if you have a website and somebody comes to see you, will say, "Oh, hello, welcome to my website," and then how are you today? And then next day they come back and say, "Oh, hello, how are you? Welcome to my website. I've never seen you before." Like I'm just purging the data every day because the cookies are not sticking in the browser. It's just a funny image of this, but the trend goes on, and Google have announced that they will remove third-party cookies from the browsers. I think they extended the date a bit. I think we're talking about 2022. Doesn't really matter. The end of cookies is arriving. And this will have an impact on digital marketing to big time, and we've got, so we ran this as a survey as well on LinkedIn just a couple of days ago, and in this case you're seeing 35% of people saying yes, we feel that we're prepared for this. We didn't dig in to how did you do this, because there isn't much you can actually do. You don't know what's going to happen. Nobody knows what's going to be possible or not. On LinkedIn, we had a 25%. I think in the poll we had 25% saying we feel ready for this. But a lot of people are like, well, okay, we're just going to have to wait and see what becomes possible and impossible. But it's going to change the whole nature of the digital marketing ecosystem. So that's one of the biggies that people need to think about in the future. Let's move on to the next few here. Have you started planning for this? Well, yes, a lot of people have started planning, but they still don't feel prepared for it. Very obviously, will it impact your choice of technology stack? Certainly for a third of them. I mean, I think there's a lot of technology vendors out there who are going to say, wow, this is a good time for us. Volatile times are good for business, are good for making people change their minds. It's a lot of uncertainty about how this is going to pan out. I mean, so we're feeling, we're giving directions on certain things, but people are lost, I think, in this setting. We tried to chart out some of the things, and I think what the first thing here is we try to give dimensions to some of these things that we're seeing happening. There are things that have to do with the human versus the machine versus the data. Some of them are more human and data. How do we work? Some of them are more human versus machine. What kind of technology are we using? We try to describe these 6 things. Biggest single recommendation to prepare for the end of cookies. Oh my God. I think we're going to get back to this, yeah? I'll ask Lukas. So we came up with 6 things that we find important. We talked about one of them already, the one called deciphering black boxes. Basically saying, okay, this is black box. I don't know what's happening inside, but I want to try to understand as much as I can about it. So that's one. We talked a little bit about strategy versus performance, which is sort of a big challenge there of saying, okay, am I looking long-term maybe or just short-term? And how can I make these things actually work together? The variable technology, am I going to have to update my technology on the basis of the things that are happening? And then there was this one, this is a funny one, the death by optimization. It's sort of a one that you can run into if you optimize too hard or if you're too short term, basically. Where if you don't sort of step back sometimes, purge the data, take that broader view, you're going to optimize yourself into very tiny business amounts. Yeah. And finally, the one up there is sort of very much the human dimension of remotely anywhere or working from anywhere, which is becoming something. So we in the survey, it's quite interesting. There's was 20 agencies responding, and we had I think we had 2 to 4 of them either already going 100% remote, no offices, or in the process of going there. which is sort of very, very big steps in terms of organization. I mean, how you organize a business to not have an office anymore. Crazy stuff. So these are sort of the big dimensions that we touch upon at the end of the report. As we're almost at the end, I think this is the final slide. I think you showed the discount code already, didn't you, Fred, on the screen?
We did. So there it is again, discount code. Awesome. And so, Lukas, while people can download the report here, let's talk about those two technical questions. What is your single biggest recommendations about the end of cookies? And then also asking how will remarketing shape the VUCA world without cookies?
Yeah, so
take the second one first.
That's basically where the biggest impact will be, because without cookies, you get basically less data. So your remarketing will then be therefore less efficient. Now, I'm very pragmatic in my view of the sort of whole cookie removal, in that, yes, there will not be any cookies, but the platforms will still be able to track users and what they do online. And what this means is that as an advertiser, it's almost a little bit of a wait and see game from my point of view, because I need to see what the new developments will be that will basically depreciate cookies, but then it will sprout new tracking methods.
And I suppose that, like, the high level, it just means that if you have a website, like, really find reasons to encourage users to be logged in, give them benefit of being logged in, because that is the thing that then enables you to track without a cookie. And that enables you to track across sessions. I mean, tracking within sessions, very easy. Just put stuff in the URL. There's no cookie needed for that. But across sessions, that's where you want to have that logged in user.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's think about those types of scenarios. And it does mean maybe installing a little bit of a different technology stack and thinking about tracking in a different way. But it's certainly not undoable. And the other thing, I mean, we're already looking at the removal of third-party cookies, and those are usually more of the sketchy cookies, right? To be honest, like, I think a lot of people don't really have that big of a problem with first-party cookies, because they are the thing that helps make for a better experience on individual websites. It's more that, okay, I just visited a financial website, and now Facebook got that data. Like, I did not actually go to Facebook, and like, why did that happen? And that's what confuses users. That's why it's a bit nefarious in some cases. And watch the movie The Social Dilemma on Netflix if you don't understand what's happening with all of that. Fantastic movie, The Social Dilemma, right? But yeah, users don't want to be manipulated by the artificial intelligence machine to buy stuff they don't need.
I think, interestingly as well, we kind of get a little bit of a visibility, or more visibility, on some of these cookie changes here in Europe, because the changes to GDPR, which is basically data protection, means that you now, as a website owner, have to show exactly which cookies you want users to sign up for, and basically allow you to track them across your website journey. So you've got your necessary ones for the running of the website, and then you've got all of the additional ones, such as all the social cookies and everything else, and you can opt in or opt out individually between those if you're willing to invest that time. The vast majority of users still just click on accept all, but I think generally speaking, there's about a 20% drop off in terms of the data that you will be able to track just by asking whether people will accept those cookies or not.
Yeah, I want to give my very quick answer to those two questions. The first question was, will remarketing be in trouble? And the answer is yes. And hopefully all the bad stuff will die off, and then there'll be some intelligent use of user data. And the second one was, what is the one biggest recommendation in the end of cookies is, well, get direct relationships with your end clients via email or some other way of having that, of owning that data of your relationship with clients. If you only have access to your clients via, I don't know, via notifications or via audiences or via Amazon or via some other intermediary, you're probably going to lose a lot of that access. So build your proprietary data on users and get direct relationship with them is my one piece of big advice there.
Good advice. Well, gentlemen, thank you for writing the report. Thanks for offering a bunch of copies for free to our audience. Thanks for joining me. And we will be back with PPC Town Hall. We're taking a few weeks off, but November 18th, we'll be back with a smart bidding session. We're going to get philosophical, but also very tactical. We're going to have Google on the call to tell us what they think about smart bidding. And I will tell you, given what Google believes we should do, how you can still manipulate it, still optimize it using Optmyzr and other tools. So definitely a topic that I know is close to a lot of people's hearts. So keep watching. Thank you for watching today, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Fred.